Okay, video recording test. So this is my 20-foot sea can that I need to put a bunch of work into. As you can see, there's a shit ton of rust. This is the exhaust port for the Webasto Chinese knockoff heater. Basically to shovel it out. It's starting to get a little bit warm now. Let's move inside. So this is my 2007 Yamaha Grizzly 700 that I need to fix. Essentially, I have the engine crankcase completely apart. This is another motor from a blown engine. But as you can see, there is a shit ton of condensation. I'd have the heater going, but look at that. My power supply ended up getting pretty wet. Additionally, I didn't cover the exhaust holes because I just cut right through it and welded the plate to it in order to mount this piece of plywood, which has the knockoff Chinese 17,000 BTU heater, which just runs off of that power supply, that diesel fuel. This is the fuel pump. This needs to be replaced with something that is a bit better, because essentially when it's super cold, minus 48, sorry for the loud beep, this pump actually shrinks, and there's a little diaphragm that goes back and forth magnetically. That is a problem. But as you can see, pretty rough. I'm gonna have to basically, I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna completely gut this and redesign it, because I have a couple of ideas to potentially look at getting it back together, preferably using a product called Insufast, which is R12, which will basically just go in between all of the grooves and provide you with a surface to put up plywood. Plywood preferably over drywall. As you can see, there's a bit of a snow leak here. It's because I basically started cutting a doorway in so that I can add a door. I've got up to pretty much about 6 feet on the one side, 3 feet on the other. I just got kind of bored of it for the most part because, well, I was just using a face mask here. It was tough going, so I eventually ended up just starting to look at using a plasma cutter instead, which would make it so much faster. But there are some things that I should probably point out. These are the old Grizzly parts. I'm gonna have to sort through them all. All of these bearings have to be replaced with new bearings. There should be a crankcase here from the old crankcase, but it is not here. I'm not too sure where it is. I know, probably should just order a brand new one and throw that all in. This is the new cover, which has an oil cooling line. The reason I had to take the whole engine apart was because the stator on this 700 or 686cc engine basically just kept going. And part of the problem is the stator sat during idle, it would overheat, and one of the cool things with copper is the copper windings, as heat increases, resistance also increases. So you have this feedback loop where it would get hot, super hot rather, and the resistance of the wire would cause it to feed back on itself, which is super strange, but that's just one of the things with thermodynamics. So this is the workbench I basically built. I didn't have access when I cut this OSB to a table saw, which once I had that, it was a lot easier. But I'm looking at actually an interesting thing which you can do, which is you just 3D print a couple of rigs that then connect to some EMT conduit, and you're able to just roll and glide straight, which I want to try out. But I'll probably more than likely pick up another table saw when that happens. But right now, I picked up get the best light here. Here we go. I picked up a die grinder and a bunch of bits from Princess Auto. Came in the mail. I'm gonna see if I can't clean up the old crankcase, because the old crankcase used to look like this. I ended up submerging it in vinegar, which cut a lot of the grease out. But I'm thinking before I do the die grinding, I actually might just let it sit and degreaser properly for a bit and then scrub it. And all of the oil and grease that is built up will come off, and then I can just brush it clean. So the jury's still out on whether or not I want to color it in some way, but I don't think I will. I think I'll basically reserve that for little covers like this and other components. I basically just have all of the parts in this blue bin and that green bin, and they're going to have to all go back together. And when they go back together, I basically want to be able to turn the engine over in a frame that I'll have to set up. This is a project I worked on last summer, but I never got around to finishing it because my enthusiasm for working on a lot of things was just basically dead because of, well, COVID. Just, yeah, super strange how worldwide pandemic will bring you down. But looking at this, let's look at what we're going to be doing with this frame. So I have two frames. The frame here is from a 2007. That blown engine is actually from a much newer frame. So I'm thinking I'm going to take the other frame and put everything from this Grizzly onto the other frame. And then I'll take this frame, and I coincidentally also picked up a bunch of cool things for doing air spraying and well, rust remediation. So we'll be doing a complete refurbishment of this Grizzly frame once it's all apart and onto the other. We'll obviously have to clean up the parts. I actually have to make, I think, a parts cleaning bin, which will be interesting because I'd like to go with like a heated metal container that you can just have basically have a safety lid that'll pop down in the event of a fire or anything if there's combustible material in there. But that's the idea. I've seen some cool builds online. We'll see what I end up doing. But that'll be a project for the summer. So I'll give the full video idea. You'll see some before and after photos. This is it right now. I tried to put up the plywood to hopefully give it a little bit of insulation, but that didn't work at all. This heater, by the way, 17,000 kilowatts, or 17,000 BTUs, rather, sorry. For some reason I was dealing with power related stuff, so I had that on my mind. This thing actually in minus 40, 45, minus 48, around there. It'll basically get this to about between -2 and -5. And one of the things I want to do is basically just have this heater be able to heat the entire thing to the state that you can comfortably work in here, and also thaw out snowmobiles and ATVs. But that'll require some form of insulation. So the InsoFast will be R12, but one of the things that I want to try is aerated concrete on the exterior and on the roof in order to get a decent installation. Like, I don't want to sacrifice any space on the inside. Like a lot of folks have said, just throw some 2x4s, fiberglass insulation, vapor barrier, etc. But I don't want to do that because you've already got an airtight seal with the metal seat container, and you're already working with a pretty limited amount of space. So if you add insulation to the interior, that's a big detraction. But if you just add a bunch of aerated concrete or aircrete to the exterior, like 6 inches, 8 inches, that'll give you a bit of insulation. And when you combine it with the R12, that is more than enough. And that should do the trick. So, what are the plans for April? Well, maybe even through to June. I'd like to clean this up. I actually want to crate a few things on some pallets, because I think I actually might work on this engine, not here but elsewhere. And yeah, basically just put it back together. The engine itself, not the ATV frame. The ATV frame is like a long-term project. But the engine will take a while for me to figure out and get properly done up. But there's a whole bunch of projects here that I have on the go that'll eventually be worked on. Here's my little welder. I plan on making an engine stand and rotating the Grizzly with some steel that I picked up. But this doorway will be probably the key thing that I work on and get done as soon as possible, because I want this doorway in so that I can leave these two big doors closed. The eventual plan is to take these two large folding doors, recycle the steel in some way for some other project, and add a sliding garage door. But that'll be a project for down the road. One thing I want to get away from is I want to move away at least from using wood in here. The cool thing is you can use aluminum extrusion for a lot of really cool projects. And I'm thinking for the interior, once I have the plywood up, I want to do some cool things with aluminum extrusion, maybe 40-40, 30-30, 20-20, just to build a bunch of shelving and some really cool things. Now the interesting thing that I want to do with this is I actually want it so that you can actually just lift it with a telehandler or something and have everything just be super fastened down, buttoned down, so that it's not moving all over the place and swaying. So this was an experiment with that idea, which was using containers and then using some bungee cords to tie them down. But I think if I go with extrusion, I can make a much more secure system for doing that. But that's the general idea, is do that. But you should expect a lot of videos of me working in this thing throughout the remainder of the year. Some cool stuff that I'm working on. But that's the end of the video.